I'm very, very pleased to present our final speaker for the afternoon, Alina von Davier, who used to be with ETS, but left us, and now is Senior Vice President of ACTNEXT and an adjunct professor at Fordham University, talking to us about measurement considerations for personalized learning and assessment systems. And Alina, I think you said you wanted to do this and this, right?
Yes, it's possible. Oh, I would still need probably to. Does this one work?
That should work.
It does.
Do these work? Do we know? Oh, the video person's not the tech person that's not there. I'm not sure this is working.
You know, I will
Okay.
do my best to. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here so late on Friday. Can you hear me? In the back there? All right, thank you. Thank you, Amy, for inviting me to be part of this conference. I really enjoy it very much. I always like interdisciplinary presentations, and today was absolutely interesting. And as Amy also said, I also identify several red threads among the presentations, which is really encouraging for all of us. So I will talk a bit about some of the work that I'm doing with my team at ACTNEXT, and it's all about personalized learning and assessment being blended together in digital environments. And this is the first time actually when I'm doing this presentation. I try to put some of the work that we've been doing into a more measurement context and framework. So actually I would really appreciate to have a dialogue with you. I mean, I really know almost everyone here, so it would be very nice to actually talk about these things because nothing is set in stone. A lot of this research, while not necessarily new per se, is new within the new technological opportunities. And that brings, this new framework brings with it new challenges, but new opportunities and new perspectives. So it is still a matter of debate for all of us to think in these terms. So I will start with a motivational piece just to discuss a position paper that was done by Educase in 2015, talking about the 5 domains of core functionality and how they envision the future of learning. And those 5 domains emphasize the importance of interoperability and integration. And I will bring here, I will refer to the problem of Genesis, for example, at ETS. But there are other softwares that are out there that have the same issues. Personalization for learning, especially. Analytics, advising, and learning and assessment as being part of everything else. Collaboration, collaborative problem solving being part of that. And accessibility and universal design to keep in mind that everything we do should support the learner's needs. And what does it mean for us, for example, as psychometricians, statisticians, to work in this environment? So we see at ACTNEXT, we see ourselves as being disruptive of the way the experience of learning and assessment is conducted nowadays. And I haven't quite heard much about these particular issues today. So I thought I should still keep this slide. I was debating, should I keep it, should I not? But what I want to emphasize here are, we want to change the way the data of the students is being managed, is being owned, is being provided. We would like the students themselves to have agency and have access to their own data. We would like all the experiences to be mobile. Every time, anytime, anywhere type of access to information, quality information. We would like to have interactive, adaptive, and personalized experiences. And I put here this in bold because for you, this is not anything in particular, anything special. You would actually expect that. You want any new instrument and system that provides learning and assessment to also be of quality from a psychometric perspective. However, nowadays that I am often in circles that contain primarily computer scientists, they don't really know even what to what to do with that. They would say if you have an A/B testing once in a while, you are done and you are doing quite well. So that's why I'm emphasizing this part here. And I put computational psychometrics, and I noticed that Randy this morning mentioned it. What it means is we consider the theory of psychometrics, but we bring in the data-driven information. And I will say a bit more about that because we do work in an environment in which we have access to more data than ever before. We also emphasize the use of automated everything, or as much as we can towards everything. Meaning we start with learning and assessment items, but also instructional modules, such as video, and also scaffolding. So we are working on generating automatically devised scaffolding for learning purposes. And the last one is a social component. So in one of my recent blogs for the Brookings Institution, I was talking about the ed technology, ed tech in the classrooms. And of course, I like ed tech in the classrooms, and I'm all for it. However, the way it is right now implemented in most of the country, most of the states, at the various district levels, those tools do not have not all of them, of course, it's not true for all of them, but most of them do not have sufficient psychometric backing or theoretical backing, or they don't provide social opportunities. So people would work by themselves in isolation with their computers, which we would like to change if possible. Also, I want to emphasize perhaps here that our intention is not to replace teachers by any means. We want to support teachers. And I will talk a bit about all of those within some examples in our work. So this is the outline for today. And again, it refers to Randy's presentation when I asked him why did he always use the future tense in his presentation, even in cases where he was mentioning that there are some programs who do some of that. So I think partly for him and for me is that William Gibson quote that yes, the future is already here, it's just not very evenly distributed. And then the outline for today is how to blend assessment and learning, and I will present two prototypes for personalized and adaptive learning in digital environments. One of them is an educational companion app, and the other one is HERA, Holistic Educational Resources and Assessments for science in this case. And I will also, if I have time, I will also try to talk a bit, what does it mean to think in terms of comparability for learning and assessment systems? So when I say comparability, I am thinking here in terms of not equating, but in that sense of comparability. If you have different people being part of this learning and assessment systems in different parts of the world, and if there is no common assessment, can you say anything about how those would compare with each other? So we started to do a foray in personalized learning with these two prototypes that I mentioned before. And the idea is, of course, to be as specific as we can towards the needs of each individual. So the type of work that we've been doing in this context has been to research more what learning actually means for individual students. What do I mean by that? In the traditional psychometrics, we've been working with cross-functional data. So we have tables of 0 and 1, correct, incorrect, at different points in time. But for learning, the type of data that we collect is different. It's longitudinal, it has dependencies. That means that most of the classical psychometric models won't work well, models such as item response theory. So we want to understand what would be good learning models, statistical models that could predict, emulate, describe learning. And also in terms of personalization, we want to understand at what point in time should we intervene with specific scaffolding? How do people forget? So the forgetting part is also of importance to us to be included in the learning models. We also work on expanding the evidence-centered design because, you see, there are many ed tech companies that propose personalized learning right now out there. And they come to learning from the computer science expertise. They know how to do recommenders that are automatic, they are fast, they are really fancy, and then they create systems that do something that looks, at least from outside, like a interesting, engaging learning environment. For a company like ACT, which will be the same in this case for ETS, our core competency is in the accuracy of our assessments. That's where we take pride of. And we know that they are quite good. So at ACTNEXT, our systems start actually from the assessment. They do not start directly from the learning perspective. We are moving into that area, but this is where we start. We start with assessment data, which means that from the theory perspective, we like to start with expanding the evidence-centered design. We believe that this is a very good framework that can help us build the evidence that's necessary not only for making claims for assessment, but also for understanding the way you think about learning. And I will give some examples about some of the work in that case. We are also working on multimodal analytics within this context. What we are trying to do here is to fuse different types of student data together. What do I mean by that? So we will have assessment data, but we also have assessment from different types of instruments. We would have, in our case, ACT test data, the WorkKeys test data, Tessera, which is a social emotional learning exam that will have data from that. And then in addition to that, we have the process information and timing data. So the question for us is, what is the best way to model these different types of data from different sources, to put them together? Should you model each individual stream and then corroborate the information at the end, or should you first corroborate them and then model multidimensionally? We are, I mentioned before, working on different types of item generation, content generation, and scaffolding generation. And this is actually quite important. I will say more about it. We are working on aligning the testing instrument and the instructional resources through taxonomies. What are those? So when we develop a test in any company, you have specifications, you have a framework, a theoretical framework to which each particular section is being developed to. At ACT, we have the ACT Holistic Framework. So that's an example of a taxonomy that it is actually quite fine-grained, and all of our items now are being tagged with respect to that taxonomy. So what we are doing is to align different instruments according to this common taxonomy. And I will talk more later about that. We also work on development. So here is where the prototyping part comes into place. So it's not just that we write papers about these new models, but we actually develop either the system themselves or the app, as in our companion app. And we are working on building these capabilities. And the way we deliver them at the moment, some of them are still under discussion, would be the app or through the delivery systems such as Tao or Smart Sparrow, which is a new partner of ours at ACT. The business innovation part is at the moment still, we are working towards that. The idea there is, how do we want to reach out to our clients, which in this case would be students directly, and how do you give more agency to the student? Again, if you have any questions, please ask it at any time, because I probably have too many slides and I will just stop somewhere. So it's better if we have a dialogue before I get to that point. Please.
Okay, you asked.
Yes, always.
So the idea, I'm genuinely curious about this. The idea of programmed instruction dates back to Thorndike, like 1910, and the first prototypes of that, I think, were built in the 1920s. And as a method of instruction, it never took off. So, except in a few instances. So what's new, and why is it going to sell
I would say pretty much, if it's not a book, then these are all new things. And I think they are quite appealing. At least I would like to have that. That's why we believe that these are the disrupting characteristics of our work, especially the data access. Giving agency to the person herself to make sense of her own information, her own progress, track it over time, compare it eventually with other people, or at least cohort visually. So a bit more like you would have a Fitbit and your app, and you can track your own progress over time. So that's under number 1 there. And this is very unusual for testing, by the way. So it's not so unusual for learning, but for testing part, this is very unusual.
Do students have the level of self-awareness and expertise in the learning domains to actually own their data and make good use of it? In other words, do we believe that they're at a level for most tasks and most instructional domains to be able to basically self-assess and make good use of it? Or is it more likely to be a distraction? Because we know in some settings, feedback and information actually interferes with learning rather than facilitating learning.
I like that question too. So we have right now, we have some research projects on exactly that idea. So what do we know about self-directed learning, and how can we encourage and support self-directed learning? So far, we learned that helping students set goals for themselves are going to help with being more self-directed learners and more efficient learners, as well as identification with, say, a particular type of story. We have not implemented any of those, but I will emphasize how we approach that. So we have 3 ways in the app to approach the teaching part. Yes, please.
That's what I was going to ask. What do you envision as the role of the teacher?
So thank you. So what I have here, and I will talk a bit more about teaching as well. So this is how I present even to my team. I said, this is our universe. This is where we work. And it looks like one slide, but it's actually kind of a lot on that slide. So let me unpack it. This is where our past has been as a company in the assessment area. We've been doing assessment, we know how to do them, we are really good at it. This is learning. Well, ACT has a few learning products, more than ETS, for example, but still not quite at the level we are talking about now, at that fine level, at the continuous learning opportunity. And here is teaching. And we think that these 3 actually span the school environment. Of course, it's again, not all the factors are there. Anybody can argue that the parents, that the political system, the school district, the policymakers, that everything else would matter. But you need to restrict yourself somewhere, and that's where we restrict ourselves. And at the moment, this is still our weakest part. However, the way we think of the role of the teacher here is in terms of adaptive teaching. So we've been talking quite a lot about adaptive learning, and we address, we help students or cater to students to help them learn adaptively. But we, as you said, we don't really have much to say about the teacher. But on the other hand, everything you build for adaptive learning is about teaching, and is about how do you make that student learn better, which are pedagogical aspects. So this at the moment, we don't have any prototype direct for this one, for the adaptive teaching part, but we do have a roadmap. We had a research retreat and to think a bit more on how to build adaptive teaching, how to support the teachers. So now let me tell you about what is inside here. We have here the content, what type of learning content we need. Well, let's say math, science, ELA, we can have behavior. So this is based on the ACT holistic framework type of thinking. And here we would have both instructional content, which could be videos, could be items with scaffolding, and we also have testing content, which are more like our traditional items for assessment. Here in the middle, we have the pink thing is the taxonomy. I mentioned before the ACT holistic framework, but there are other taxonomies, like NGSS is a taxonomy. Our company, OpenEd, has its own taxonomy. They call it the OLO. And then what we have here, you see here this LEAP, the LEAP platform. This is a platform that we are building inside ACT to represent a data lake, so data that talk with each other across all of our products at ACT. So if you say, this is Johnny, and Johnny has been working with ACT over the past 5 years, took the Aspire test over 3 years, and then Johnny took the pre-ACT, and Johnny also took the WorkKeys and Tessera. Well, we will have all that data connected together, and we can identify Johnny and Johnny's trajectory within in the interactions with our tests. So all of that is being done. Is being now done. It's still work in progress under LEAP, the LEAP platform. And what we have here is the machine learning engine. And why is that here instead of here? So the triangles are the computational psychometric part. But here, this one is primarily artificial intelligence based. And what this is doing is to connect all of these types of instructional units and align them with the taxonomy, and align them yet again with all the rest, the student data from the LEAP platform. I can imagine that this is quite a lot, and again, I haven't presented this before, so your feedback actually will help me as well, or your questions. So if you have questions here, please let me know. And the circle here is the social engagement. What I mean by that is the work that we've been doing on collaborative problem solving, the work that we are doing on creating environments that allow people to work together. Or, as you'll see in our app eventually, we allow people, or we want to allow people to share their information with their peers, because there is research showing that those who is almost like a social accountability. So these are my goals, and I want to make it to this point, and this is my progress. And those students who actually share that with their peers tend to do better, seem to be more motivated, and it becomes motivating for the other students as well. So this circle here is the social environment. Now the triangles are the type of models that we are considering for different purposes. For the assessment part, we have traditionally classical test theory, item response theory. But once you move into the learning environment, as I mentioned before, the data have dependencies and are much more fine-grained. So in order to make sense out of them, you need to use stochastic models. And in the realm of stochastic models, the most common one is probably the BKT for learning. This is Bayesian knowledge tracing that has been introduced by the team at Carnegie Mellon based on Anderson's work. Maybe in the, when was that, 90s? Well, I guess ACTAR was older, but then traditionally BKT was maybe in the 90s or 2000. And of course, it's the ELO system that's very old, maybe 60 to 70 years old, and has been used to rank chess players. So why are these attractive for us? So BKT obviously is attractive to us because it tracks the learning component, and it can, with the appropriate types of data, you can say whether a student achieved a given level of understanding of the construct or mastering of the construct or not. But the ELO is actually even more interesting because you do not need to calibrate the items before. In an IRT, every psychometrician here knows that if you want to run and try out your items and you need to calibrate them, then you need a lot of people and a lot of items all happening at the same time. And that's really hard to do, especially in a learning environment. Also, in a learning environment, the difficulty of an item is very tricky because it's not the same difficulty for this, even for the same person at different stages in the learning process. So the ELO system is much more appropriate for learning than any other way of thinking about difficulty from, say, IRT. On this side here between learning and teaching, as well as assessment and teaching, we are now looking at models that are based on networks. So wire recognition model, which is a model that Gunther Maris and Han van der Maas at University of Amsterdam developed. So these are, this is also wire recognition model is based on network psychometrics. But again, we have less, we have done less work on this side that links the teaching together. Yes?
So this is a really exciting concept, Alina. When I left ACT in 2012, if the state wanted to purchase the 8th, 10th, and 12th grade system, they had to go in 3 times. And if they wanted to link, they actually literally had to go into the portal and make 3 purchase orders. And if they wanted a report over time of those students at 8th, 10th, and 12th, the reporting service, which happened to report to me, had to actually run those reports one off. So I'm giving that as context of reality versus vision and implementation. So my reaction to this, and I'm hoping that between 2012 and now, with the Aspire system, the back-end databases are more robust. So my question is, it seemed, and I'm giving you my editorial here, that this is a futuristic and comprehensive vision that's going to have to be released in increments, unless you're thinking that you're going to have all this done at once and you're going to deliver it. So it would be helpful to know the phasing of this.
Yeah. So I will mention that. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, you are right. First of all, nothing is going to happen like, I don't know, the rain with frogs or the rain with spiders I read somewhere recently. So it's not happening like this. It takes a lot of work, and it's going to be incremental. And I have only 5 minutes, and I'm not even through half of my slides. So yeah, definitely, it's going to take time. But that being said, we are a bit, there are things that are happening already. For example, this platform is actually being built right now, and we don't have, say, the Aspire data, but we have the data from Bench Prep, which is another company that runs the test prep for ACT, and they deliver the data for us in real time, and it's all on the LEAP platform, just as an example. Or we have the data from OpenEd coming into the LEAP platform. So yeah, we don't have everything there yet, but we do have more than one may think. The same here, and that's what I was hoping to present today, but we actually we started to work on aligning the instruments based on the taxonomy. And we have several papers that this is the computational psychometrics for those of you who don't quite know what I mean by that, but I also have a list with some papers that we just wrote recently. So computational psychometrics is a blending model where we still have eventually your test data, but you might have other types of data such as video, chat, audio, and then you use data mining to extract the most salient features, and then you use machine learning for the mid-level representations, and then you build your psychometric models at the last level, and that will need to go back again to try it at least several times to refine it as you collect the data. But to get back, that's where I wanted to get. We have these papers, these are all new. This one, for example, is now on archives, anyone can have a look at it. And I think this paper is going to be a building block for what we are trying to do, how to understand this transition or these links between testing and learning, and how to understand it from a psychometric perspective. So what the team did here was they look at the relationship between IRT and the Bayesian knowledge tracing. So, and of course you can think that it makes sense. The Bayesian knowledge tracing is looking at the evolution over time, and the IRT is looking at the end to see if you actually understood. So this paper is trying to explicate mathematically the relationship between the models. This one is, and we have on parts of that, we have a patent application, is on building cognitive diagnostic models for learning in a way that also uses the behavioral data that we collect from the app. And the next one here is on modeling dynamic interactions for intelligent tutoring. So you would have collaboration taking place, but you want to teach people to collaborate, and what type of models would you use for that? And I expanded the BKT for this to include the team component. And let's say the skills at the team level would be to negotiate, to share information, and so on, and those would be the skills that you monitor over time. So those are all available, actually. This was just published, I think a few weeks ago. This was submitted. I don't know when the book will come out, and this is available on archives. This is a bit about our partnerships, but actually what I wanted to emphasize here is a bit more about the holistic framework. I want you all to know that this is actually it's available, it's free, and it's part of what is called Open Salt. So I would encourage you all to have a look at it. I think it's really nice that the ACT did that and made it available for everyone. So I think a lot of other new tools can be built and be aligned with the holistic framework. And the nice part about it, I really like the way ACT has been thinking about that, and the Wayne Camera, whom everyone here knows, he was the lead author on the paper that describes the framework, and it has core academic skills, but also cross-cutting capabilities, behavioral skills, and education and career navigation. I'm going to try to move quickly, although my 5 minutes probably passed as well. I told you before that one way we want to start this work is to think in terms of evidence-centered design for learning. So we are expanding it primarily in this part, in the expanded evidence model, in the knowledge evidence model that are links between task, observable, and inferences about knowledge. This is for assessment. And in this one is pretty much about the same for learning with an emphasis on change.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah. Sorry? Oh, I
thought it was for you too. Yeah. I think mine was my fault.
So this will be, so we are working on expanding on each of these models. And this is the companion app. It's a research-based prototype. We just finished the pilot. We piloted in South Carolina with a relatively small number of students. It has modular capabilities, which are also to be deployed in various other products, such as the ACT Academy that was launched yesterday. So parts of the education companion will merge into the academy. So this is the principle. We call it the Missing Link project. This is what's behind this companion app. And this is the LEAP platform that I mentioned before, where multiple types of data are available. The matching at the student level will also take place here. This is the holistic framework. This is a diagnostic model that will depend on as many data points we have about the student. A feedback model that will relate to this, and then we'll have a feedback dashboard on the and then recommendations from the OpenEd instructional modules. And all of this will be on, it is on an app that at the moment is under test flight. So at the moment we are building also this link here from the OpenEd into the LEAP platform, and I believe that was ready maybe 2 weeks ago. So it's all the reporting and the diagnostic model is with respect to the ACT holistic framework. Again, academic, behavior, cross-cutting, and so on. And I have some screenshots here, but I will just skip them because it's late. And these are the Google Analytics that are available on how often actually the students use the app, what type of resources they use, and so on. And these are the reports that we sent to the Clinton High School weekly. These were the weekly reports for teachers and counselors. Again, on what type of resources they used and when. And this is another way of pretty much presenting the same information I had before with a bit more details, but I will skip that. Just because I want to move to show you about the second pilot that we are doing, which is more of a traditional adaptive learning tool that we are building. And we call it HERA, and it will be a focus on science. And it's again, research-based prototype. We plan to have the items piloted in May. And the focus here is to try out different types of scaffolding and the value of scaffolding for teaching people. And probably we will use the ELO system for calibration. So there are different types, the doors to science, scientific literacy, reasoning, and hands-on. And this will be the system characteristics. These are not yet in place, so just that, to answer your question, so this does not exist. What I showed you before, the app, that one exists. But this one does not exist yet. And again, we want to have the student-controlled navigation, the same question that was asked earlier about agency, so we hope the student will have more agency. Interactivity and transparency, different elements for gamification, especially with the use of the scaffolding, for which we make them pay if they ask for hints, and they have to make decisions whether to use the hint or not. And we also are playing a bit with the automatic content generation here. These are the type of items that we are looking at. We already have representations for this type of items and for this one, but not quite for this one. So this will be in the future for simulations, games, and collaborations. So, and I have more about the items and how we are building them, but I guess I could probably just show you an example on how we might create this type of items more on an automatic way. And this will relate a bit with Mark's presentation earlier on item generation. So this is an example from a task in computer science, and we try to identify different pieces of the item, and then we see how we can create many items of the same type. So there will be, we are still trying to, this is something that we will experiment with the students if they prefer trains, or it will depend on the age probably, but what would be a best analogy for each of them, because they will have both the self-directed learning as well as recommended learning. And I will stop here because this is also more technical, is a new way of thinking of comparability of scores and comparability of outcomes and comparability of learning outcomes. That is, it was anyway my third topic, so I think I should stop here. But thank you all for your attention. I'm sorry it took so long.
Well, no, that was a perfect way to end a day with a lot of things to look forward in the future. So thank you very much, Alina. And thank you, everyone, for attending and for sticking it out. I hope that you found this enjoyable and informational. And stay tuned. We'll see what Dave comes up with next year. Right, Dave? Thank you.